On June 11, 2026, the biggest sporting event on Earth kicked off in a city that is running out of water. Estadio Azteca, freshly renamed Estadio Banorte, hosted the opening match of the World Cup, Mexico, against South Africa. More than 80,000 people filled the stands. The city had even named the day a local holiday, so the whole capital could stop and watch. Mexico won, 2-0, with a goal in the 9th minute and another in the second half. Less than 2 miles away, families in the neighborhoods around the stadium have gone weeks without water from the tap. The aquifer that still gives the city most of its drinking water is being pulled out of the ground faster than rain can ever put it back. And in the worst-hit parts of the city, the ground itself is sinking close to 20 inches a year. But here is the detail nobody in the broadcast booth mentioned. Right across from Exit 7 of that stadium, behind a wall, there is a private well. Blue pipes stick up out of the dirt. The water from that well does not go to the homes next door. It goes to the stadium. The neighborhood beside the Azteca is called Santa Ursula Coapa. It is an old, working community in the south of the city, and its people can go days without water from their own pipes. Meanwhile, a few steps away, the well runs for the field. Residents say their trouble got worse around 2018 when that nearby well was handed to a private company. In 2019, that company, Televisa, which part owns the stadium, was given the right to pull up to 450 million liters of water out of the ground every year. The community says the deal was never legal. They have been asking the government to take the well back and point it at their houses instead. About 200,000 people live in the shadow of that stadium. The same week the world arrived to watch a soccer match, many of them were filling buckets at home. So how does a city of 22 million people end up here, throwing its doors open to the planet at the exact moment its taps are failing? To understand it, you have to follow where the water went and where it is still going. The timeline reads like a slow leak that nobody plugged. In the year 1325, the Aztecs built their capital, Tenochtitlan, on an island in the middle of a chain of lakes. They built raised roads and canals. They grew food on floating gardens. The whole city ran on water. In 1521, the Spanish took the city and made a choice that still shapes every day here. They drained the lakes. They saw the water as a danger, a thing that flooded the streets, so over the next few hundred years they pushed it out through canals and tunnels. River by river, the city buried the old water. Of the 48 rivers that once ran through the valley, all but one were sealed into sewage pipes and paved over. By the early 1900s, the city had begun to sink, and people had begun to measure it. By the 1950s, the place was growing fast, millions of new people pouring in, and the only way to feed all those taps was to reach down and pull water from the aquifer, the soaked layer of sand and gravel deep underground that the old lakes left behind. The fans who fill the Azteca are sitting on the bottom of a drained lake, and almost none of them know it. The pumping never stopped, it only grew, and the deeper the city reached, the lower the ground sank. Scientists have now tracked that drop for nearly 100 years. Now zoom in on the map, because the pain is not spread evenly. The Azteca sits in the south, in the borough of Coyoacán. Out east is Iztapalapa, home to nearly 2 million people and some of the longest dry spells in the city. To the southeast is Xochimilco, where a few of the old canals still survive. And in the center sits the old historic core, the oldest, most famous, and most clearly sinking ground of all. The real trouble starts here, and it is the part that makes this more than a normal shortage. The aquifer does not sit in open rock. Above it lies a thick layer of soft clay, the old lakebed itself. For a long time, that clay was packed with water, and the water held it up. As the city pumped the aquifer harder and harder, the clay began to dry out and squeeze down. Picture a wet sponge holding up a heavy book. While the sponge is full, the book stays level. Pull the water out, and the sponge flattens. The book drops. And here is the cruel part. When you pour water back onto a crushed sponge, it does not puff back up. The clay is the sponge, the city is the book, and the sponge is staying flat. That is why Mexico City is sinking. Not in one slow, even way, but in patches, some streets dropping faster than others, cracking the ground between them. There is another loss buried in that clay, one that rarely gets mentioned. The old aquifer used to push water up to the surface on its own, in springs, the way a full bottle spills over. Pump it down far enough and that push fades. The springs stopped rising years ago. Land that once gave water freely now has to be drilled and dragged out of the deep. And the city is taking it out about twice as fast as nature can put it back. Enrique Cabral, an earth scientist at the National Autonomous University of Mexico, has put the damage plainly. The sinking, he says, tears at the city's core systems: the subway, the drainage tunnels, the water mains, homes, and the streets themselves. Read that list again. The water system itself is on it. The sinking breaks the very pipes that carry the water, and the broken pipes leak, and the leaks waste even more of the water the city is fighting to keep. The problem feeds itself, and the leaks are not a small thing. Mexico City sits on more than 1,000 kilometers of main pipe and another 12,000 kilometers of smaller lines underneath that. As the ground shifts and snaps them, around 40% of the city's water escapes before it ever reaches a tap. Put it another way, of every 311 liters that enter the system for a single person each day, about 134 are lost on the way, to leaks, to theft, to taps. Nobody is tracking. The city loses almost half its water to its own broken plumbing. You can now watch the ground move from space. Between October of 2025 and January of 2026, a NASA satellite mapped the surface across the whole city. In some areas, it is dropping almost an inch every single month. In the worst neighborhoods, close to 20 inches a year. The Metropolitan Cathedral, downtown, started back in 1573, leans clearly to one side. The Grand Opera House nearby tips and settles a little deeper each year. Streets in the old center slope and twist where they should run flat. And one part of this sounds impossible. The same city that is running dry also floods. When those few months of hard rain finally come, the water hits streets that can no longer drain because the old rivers are sealed in pipes and the sinking ground has bent the drainage tunnels out of shape. So the rain the city badly needs mostly rushes across the concrete and back out of the basin, taking cars and flooding homes on the way. The big storm in the summer of 2025 that pushed the reservoirs back up also swamped streets downtown. A city of 22 million can be short of water and underwater in the same week. And this is the detail that should have stopped it all years ago. Scientists warned, again and again, that pumping the aquifer this hard would wreck the ground and the pipes both. The warning was clear. For decades, the city mostly answered by propping up its famous landmarks and drilling more wells. The warning sign was right there. It was ignored. If you are finding this useful, subscribe. We cover water, land, and the systems holding our cities up every week with the full picture you need to actually follow what is going on. Step back from the stadium for a moment and look at the whole valley, because the water here does not come from one place. It is pieced together from several, and each one is under strain. Well over half the water in Mexico City comes straight up from that sinking aquifer. The rest is hauled in from far away, and the way it gets here is one of the largest water projects ever built. It is called the Cutzamala. To bring water to a city in a bowl on a mountaintop, engineers had to make water climb. The system reaches 60 to 150 kilometers out to far-off dams and reservoirs, then pumps that water up more than 1,100 meters of mountain through 322 kilometers of tunnels and canals, before gravity finally carries it down into the city. It runs through the largest water treatment plant in Latin America. It cost about $1.3 billion to build. And lifting all that water uphill takes so much power that the pumps cost around $65 million a year to run, close to the electricity a mid-sized city uses. And that machine is wearing out. The Cutzamala began its first big upgrade in 4 decades only in 2025. Its giant pumps were built to last 15 to 20 years, and some of them have never once been replaced. The parts are so large and so unusual that they are not made anywhere else in the world. So when one fails, there is no shelf to pull a new one from. In 2025, inspectors found that one of the 35 pumping units at the main plant was already failing. The machine carrying water over a mountain to a sinking city is itself running on borrowed time. There is an older lifeline too. Back in 1951, the city built the Lerma system to pull water from wells to the west. It still sends in a small share, around 6%, and draining it helped sink the towns out at the source. And in one last twist, some of the very tunnels first dug to throw the valley's water out are now run in reverse, used to carry water back in. A city that spent 400 years learning how to get rid of water now spends a fortune learning how to drag it back. All of that work, all of that money and power, to supply somewhere between a fifth and a third of the city. And here is where the story you may have heard goes sideways. You may have read that Mexico City's reservoirs were nearly empty. A couple of years ago, that was close to true. The city had declared an official water emergency in late 2023. By the spring of 2024, the Cutzamala dropped to about 35%. People started saying the words, "Day Zero," the day the taps run dry. It was an election year, and the water lines and the protests spilled straight into the campaigns. Whole neighborhoods marched. The tankers could not keep up. Then it rained, hard. The summer of 2025 brought some of the heaviest rain in years. One storm over the city center was the biggest since 1952 and flooded the very streets it fell on. By the fall, the Cutzamala had climbed back above 97%, its highest level in a decade. The mayor went on stage and said the city would not run short in 2026. So in plain terms, the reservoirs are full right now. The dams are fine. But this was never really about the dams. The rain can fill a reservoir in a season. The rain cannot refill the aquifer, and it cannot uncrush the clay. The deep groundwater the city leans on is being pulled down faster than nature can ever replace it. Water scientists who study it say there is no way it comes back within 100 years. The surface looks better. The thing underneath does not. Dario Solano Rojas, an earth science engineering professor at that same university, has been blunt about what day zero even means. For the people already living without water, he says, the date is not in the future. If I run out of water, he said, then for me, it's day zero already. And it is not a handful of people. Another scientist at the same university has described whole neighborhoods going without water for weeks at a time, long before the dry season even peaks. In this city, the shortage is not one coming event. It is a daily fact for millions, spread unevenly across the map. Picture this: a morning in Iztapalapa. A woman turns the tap and nothing comes. She has done this before, so there is already a barrel in the yard and a tank on the roof, both running low. She listens for the sound of a truck, because in her part of the city the water arrives by tanker, called a pipa, and for some families, it comes only on Tuesdays and Sundays. Some stretches, residents have said, the pipes give nothing for 2 whole months. So they catch rain when they can, wash clothes by hand in buckets, and use the same water twice, once for the laundry and again for the floors. That is not a disaster story from the future. That was last year, and the year before, and it is this year too. So let's walk the damage outward, from the well by the stadium to the edge of the whole basin. First, the neighborhood next door. In Santa Ursula, Coapa, the homes sit a short walk from a well that pumps for a soccer field. Residents say their own supply got worse after that well was handed to a private company. They are asking the government to take it back and aim it at their houses instead. In December of 2025, the mayor stood beside the president and said the stadium's well was now in the hands of the city. It sounded like good news. The very next day, residents went to a meeting with city officials, and those officials said they had no information about any handover and showed up with no plan to fix the neighborhood's water. You would think someone would have a clear answer about a well sitting at the center of a World Cup. Nobody did. Second, the split between rich and poor. This is the number that says it all. In the rich western districts, people use somewhere between 800 and 1,000 liters of water per person every day, enough to keep gardens green and fountains running. In the poorest neighborhoods, the number is 28 liters per person per day, according to the city's own Human Rights Commission. Same city, same crisis, and a gap of more than 30 times in how much water a body gets. And there is a bitter math underneath it. Where the pipes fail, families buy what they can, bottled water to drink and trucked water for the rest. So the people with the least money often end up paying the most for water, while the homes with the green gardens pay almost nothing for all they use. Third, the heart of the city. The cracked plazas, the leaning cathedral, the sinking opera house. The old historic center, where the official fan festival was set up in the main square, is the very ground that is twisting and dropping the fastest. Crowds gathered there to watch matches on big screens above streets that are slowly buckling beneath them. Fourth, the bones under the streets. The subway lines, the drainage tunnels, the water mains, all of it bends and snaps as the clay drops at different speeds. Every broken main is more of that 40% gone, water lost from a system that cannot spare a drop. Fifth, the basin itself. 22 million people share this valley on top of a system that scientists say may never come back. The ground keeps falling, The aquifer keeps draining, and the city keeps drilling, because there is nowhere easy left to go. There is a long, strange echo in all of this. This was once a city of water. The Aztecs built it on lakes and ran it on canals. The people who came after decided the water was in the way and forced it out, river by river, into pipes and tunnels. Now, 700 years later, the children of that choice are pulling the last ghost of those lakes out of the clay, and the ground is sinking into the hole the water leaves behind. A city that began on water is slowly going under for the lack of it. And the valley itself gets less than 30 inches of rain a year, almost all of it crammed into a few summer months. So for half the year, there is barely any new water falling at all. And into that exact moment, the World Cup arrived. 48 teams, 104 matches across 3 countries, 13 of those games in Mexico, the opening match on June 11th in a stadium rebuilt and renamed and fitted with around 90,000 seats, a private well pumping behind Exit 7 to keep it all running. On opening night, the lights came up and a global cast of singers, Shakira and Andrea Bocelli among them, performed for a worldwide audience, while the host city below them was still, in places, going dry. Not everyone cheered. The rebuild did more than rename the stadium. The plan ringed it with new shopping and leisure space, and residents say the wave of building around it threatens to push longtime families out and pull even more water toward the businesses that follow. Real estate, one local organizer put it, dreams of coming to the south of the city to get the people's water. The stadium had only just reopened in late March, with a friendly match against Portugal to show off its new name and its new shine. The very next day, residents painted a busy ring road like a soccer field and played matches on the asphalt to call the whole thing a World Cup of Dispossession, built on their water, their rent, and their streets. Others marched under a banner that simply read, "FIFA Go Home." A major human rights group warned, before kickoff, that the tournament carried real risks for the people standing in its path. The mayor herself admitted the obvious. You cannot host a World Cup, she said, while the people next to the great stadium have no water. The tournament landed in summer, in the heat, so the rules now include official water breaks. The match stops, and the players walk to the side and drink water right there on the field, on live television, in front of the world. Inside the stadium, the water never stops. Outside it, a few streets over, people are still counting the days until a truck shows up. So the questions hang over the valley tonight. Whose water is it? The companies or the cities? And why did 2 parts of the same government answer that question 2 different ways on 2 days in a row? How do you refill an aquifer that scientists say will not return for 100 years? What happens to a city of 22 million when the ground it stands on keeps dropping and the pipes keep snapping? And what does it say that the world came to celebrate in a place where 200,000 of its neighbors were filling buckets a few blocks away? The matches will go on, the crowds will roar, the players will pause for their water breaks, and the cameras will pull back to show a packed and shining stadium. And behind the wall across from Exit 7, out of every shot, the blue pipes are still pumping. The well is still running. The ground around it is still going down. And a few streets away, a family sets out an empty bucket and waits to hear the truck.